Setting this at maximum power. Laser and charged particle beam weapons.
Good morning, gents. I have music playing in the background, so you have to excuse that for a minute. Something's playing in my head, so that's on me. Well, good morning. We've arrived at another Friday, so technical difficulties. Greg, I'm going to let you take this away for just a minute while I fix this in my end.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Happy Friday to everybody. This is episode, 18 now, Jeff? Holy cow, things are flying by. We got a fascinating guest for you guys today. Definitely plop your questions in the chat. We got Chris Foulon. You guys are probably familiar with Chris. I was on his podcast, Breaking into Cybersecurity, a few months back. It's been one of the biggest opportunities from people continuing to come to me and say, I saw you on this podcast. I think you guys are doing great things. Would love to, build a relationship. Chris is really a community builder, mentor to many of us, obviously a cybersecurity expert. So he is the full trifecta in our mind. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. I think it'd be great just for the audience here to hear a little bit about kind of your background, some of the impacts you're looking to make on your community going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and it was an honor having you on my podcast. A little bit about my background. Came from IT help desk and eventually moved my way into cybersecurity. I found that I loved helping people achieve what they wanted to do in a secure way. It started from in the help desk with folks having their passwords on Post-it notes and kind of just teaching them a better way. And as we went along the way with digital transformations, companies moving to the cloud, it's been a continuous journey for me.
No, I love it. Yeah, you've seen a lot. You've seen things develop in this industry. Obviously, both as a leader and a practitioner. I think a lot of people only see one of those sides. You either see the business side or you see the practitioner side. And I think you're one of those key folks who are breaking down barriers in that avenue to kind of elevate, leaders, whether they're pivoting from, a business area, pivoting from something, technological, more on the technology side, or coming out of the military. There's a lot of impact there from folks who have a lot of valuable expertise to bring to the table that is untapped commonly. And I think, you're one of those folks that come to mind for me that are breaking through and lowering those barriers, which is what this industry really needs from our standpoint. Got a couple questions in the chat here. See, Simon, appreciate you joining us. Good to see you as well. Appreciate the heart. gives me a little bit of a warm hug this morning. So I appreciate that. See Paul Cummings in the chat.
I had to laugh this morning. I think I'm back up to speed, so my apologies, gents, around the table. I think I missed out on the coffee cup cheers, but I'll hit the screen with it. There you go. I love it. Perfect. And yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to just find out. Chris, you have a plethora of experience. We met years ago. This is the first time meeting digitally, so it's great to see you face to face time. But just how you got into the kind of coaching realm. What that driving function was, and where you guys are headed next would be helpful.
I'd say it's something that has been within me forever. Folks have always come to me for advice, even when I was the youngest help desk analyst in the company. I was the one driving the change, driving the innovation, and individuals would come to me saying that this is what you're looking to do, and I'd talk to them and just find out what really drives them to help motivate them from their core to achieve their mission versus a superficial goal that's out there that you're trying to work towards that once achieved will really bring them nothing, maybe only a piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time, finding your why, what your reason that really gets you out of bed in the morning, put your feet on the ground, really getting into the heart and soul of your passions. And then when it comes to cyber, taking I want to get into cyber and translating into what role in cyber, what roles out of the 150 plus roles there are. Definitely value the perspective, the experience, and the guidance and leadership that you bring to the table in your mission there and outside as a practitioner. We're very much alongside that path, as well as Simon Lindstedt and the great guys at InfoSec Live, to really break down that barrier to help folks, right? There's plenty of people, and we'll get into this here shortly, is that do we actually have a talent shortage, or is it a facade that we're failing to potentially train and create that pipeline? We're passionate about that because we want to leave a lasting legacy and an impact to the folks that we serve, but the communities around us. It's all about community to us at the end of the day. So we value, your inputs, your continued dedication to that cause and mission.
I'd say my mission, right, is developing the leaders of tomorrow. And that could be someone leading as an individual contributor. It could be someone leading a team or leading an organization. I like to work with them to figure out what makes them unique and what unique values they can bring to their organization, their team, or even their future employer, and help bring that out of them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I think don't happen enough within a company model, because cybersecurity is still early on. Obviously, we have leaders that have been in this space, 20, 30 years, potentially even more. It's such a rapidly moving space because you're trying to stay ahead of something that you're never potentially going to get ahead of from the threat standpoint, that I think commonly the leadership and those kind of softer skills are not prioritized. And there's really, before CPF coaching, there wasn't many outlets to go there and ask the right questions. Here's where I'm at. Here are my skills. How do you suggest I build on the skills that I want to acquire? So I think it's fascinating. You saw that gap and are taking daily strides to put people in a better position. I'm sure you're learning along the way, which is, makes it a win-win. And you can better serve the people that you serve because you're learning from people of different backgrounds, people of different mindsets. So I think it's fascinating. But do you think people kind of standing around the black ball and saying there's a talent shortage, do you think that is just bringing our industry down? Or is there something we can do to kind of cut through that and say, there's really just a disconnect between X and Y? What are your thoughts there on ways forward that we can be better as industry practitioners to elevate, folks to the next level, which will overall elevate the industry?
I think it's a disconnect. I think it's a cognitive disconnect between I need to run my business and achieve these results now versus, hey, this person's coming on. It's going to take them 6 to 9 months to get up to speed, no matter who they are. But they forget that even the senior experienced individuals are going to have that ramp up time as well, because each organization's unique. Each system that they use is unique. So there might be experiences that they can bring, but the younger generation coming into the workforce, they're going to learn just as quickly to adapt. So recognize that both the experience and the non-experience do have that ramp up time. Think logically as to what exactly you're looking for that role to deliver. And if that's truly one role or two roles, because oftentimes with tight budgets, everyone wants everything in one, and then you'll end up spending 2 to 3 times as much on a senior individual trying to achieve that. But if you had logically cut that role down into 2 mid or a mid and a junior role, you could have achieved potentially more results having 2 people versus 1. And it would add resiliency to your workforce at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's an important point that you mentioned about the ramp up time, that it's needed on both sides of the table, whether that's senior leadership or the folks coming into your organization. Many times you see in these job recs that it says, somebody that's ready to hit the ground running. I kind of have a head scratching moment. What does that look like? You have to get adjusted to, you may already know, hopefully, that what the business does and what it focuses on, product, tool, service, widget. But to get accustomed to the culture, how processes are executed upon, it takes weeks, to even get a CISO up to speed, right? So I think it's critically important to know that, to provide those outlets for those folks that, everybody is going to take some time to get adjusted and get their feet on the ground.
Well, you mentioned even a CISO, and especially a CISO, because a CISO coming into an organization doesn't just have to do the cybersecurity function. They have to know the business. They have to know what drives the business. How does this business create value for its clients? And then what are the ways that they can enable this value generation in the most secure way possible? And then that also involves building relationships with all the stakeholders across the organization. And, unless you're in person, those relationships take considerably longer to build in a remote environment. That being said, companies are looking to take advantage of that remote environment so that they have access to talent from across the country. But there's some pros and cons to that. And you're seeing some companies are starting to move back to the office so that they can try to build that kinship. But then there's a whole different aspect when you look at the intergenerational divide. Me and you, we've grown accustomed to this. We're happy, we're comfortable, we have stability for our family. The younger generation, they're more fluid. They don't mind working out of a Starbucks or working wherever, and forcing them to come back into the office just to have a meeting then creates friction for them. So you have to try to amend the different perspectives of the different generations and have them come together to create that optimal output for a team.
Yeah, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're definitely big on that. Is that creative minds from different backgrounds, different circumstances, different looks, they all drive effective output if there's the right leadership in place, providing them the platform for that. So, kind of looping back to what you said, that if somebody wants to work remote, a hybrid capacity, that doesn't necessarily stifle the output. It's about, I think, contributions at the end of the day and effectively serving the end line of that, which is your customer, partner, client. Do you see the future in the world of Chat GPT and such, and we can go off on a separate tangent there, but being remote, a lot of overhead of having those traditional brick and mortar office spaces is just now weighing down the company budget. They're trying to cut costs. And, do you find that that's going to be sustainable to bring people back in a hybrid capacity? Or, is it going to be tomorrow where, hey, look, remote is going to be the future again?
Well, I think the hybrid is likely here to stay, whether we like it or not. You'll have organizations that will consolidate their real estate holdings, potentially have a smaller footprint for a major corporate office, but they would still want their stakeholders to come together at a certain time. They might just have to plan those activities, because really, coming together, you build a different type of bond than if you were just remote. There's a tighter connection between humans when there's face-to-face interaction. So there is value in that. There might not be value in them coming to that office every day, because if their other stakeholders are across the country, they're going to the office to sit back in front of a screen to Zoom with someone across the country. That doesn't make sense. And if you force people to do that, it causes friction in their mind with regards to their role, and if this is really the type of role that they want.
Yeah, I think that the 3+ years or so, I know we're still in the mix of COVID, but has taught us that, there's real life living that goes on for folks, whether they're balancing 3 kids, their house is on fire, but they're still trying to conduct a webinar. That is the real authentic, world that people live in. That it's, I think it's somewhat been refreshing, because it just shows that if your kid comes in during a, video con, that this is how people live, right? And this is what they balance between, talk about work-life balance. This is the authentic self and the struggles and the opportunities that they have in every day. So I think having a strike and a blend of that is great. We find the value of shaking hands, looking people in the eyes, and having that face-to-face dialogue. So I definitely think hybrid will be the next wave of mainstream activities when it comes to how businesses operate. I'm curious, when it comes to training, I mentioned Chat GPT. That's the big hype right now. Bing's using it. Google has their own flavor of it. Do you feel that the future kind of training pipeline or onboarding process will be utilizing artificial intelligence in the future?
Yes, to some extent or another. You have companies that are already using artificial intelligence to drive their IVR, to drive their retention of customers by sending them social media feeds or sending them mailers just at the right time. There's AI in programming and cybersecurity and other industries. We can't stop that evolution. Just like when PCs came out, we couldn't stop them becoming the main way for businesses to create value in an information age. What we'll have to do is adapt. There'll be different types of roles. There might not be the mundane SOC analyst type role, because that might be automated out, but then you'll have more sophisticated threat hunter roles where now you need the intelligence that the artificial intelligence doesn't have to be able to do that type of threat hunting. You'll have other creative roles where, while AI can help you generate some content, you still need to tweak it to the audience that you're delivering it for. Things like that. So there's going to be AI involved in programming and cybersecurity and industry, but it will just have to adapt and be a way to make our process more efficient but humans will still be in the loop.
Yeah,
No,
great.
I love it. I think
I see that. I see the mind just churning.
no, I think a lot of different angles to go down. We could talk about AI and Chat GPT all day. We did that last week, and we'd love to have you back on the show to dive a layer deeper there, because I think when we consider exponential technology like we're going through now, like these different revolutions that we're going through from a technology standpoint, I think what it's done really productively over the past year or two is it's made people realize that they don't have all the answers, that it's almost exponential leadership. And I think you're at the perfect position to be able to help leaders adjust to these exponential technology developments. But it requires the leaders to ask questions. Commonly, 10, 15 years ago, maybe, the leaders that I was surrounded with when I, got my first job or, went out into the economy and said, hey, I'm ready to be, a contributing member. It seemed like everybody expected the leaders to have all the answers. So the folks on the team didn't really have the opportunity to hear questions from the leaders. Hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you think if we do a hybrid model that's, you work from home on Mondays and you come into the office Thursday, Friday. So just those types of conversations I see happening more. How do you get leaders out of the seat of I have all the answers and turn that into now I have smart questions that I can ask the people I'm leading so that I can be a better leader for them? And that's, servant leadership at the end of the day.
Part of that is the types of generations that we have in the workforce. That my parents, your parents, they were from a generation where they hid vulnerabilities. They hid that they didn't know the answer. And if you asked them questions and they didn't know the answer, they'd make you work 5 times as hard figuring it out versus telling you, I don't know, let's work it out together. Our generation has realized that our parents don't know all the answers. So let's open up and have smart questions. The next generation is, well, our parents don't know the answers for sure. I could go out and ask ChatGPT, or I could go out and Google that. Like they're considerably more fluid in admitting that they don't know things and how they're going to go figure it out. So it's about taking advantage of the experience from the older generations, the vulnerability from our generation, and then the fluidity to adapt of the next generation and bring them all together to create a really cool, diverse workforce.
I love it.
Because one of the things that we see for folks coming in is there's ageism, there's sexism, there's all sorts of isms. And if we can bring that diversity together, we could take advantage of those different isms for the value that they bring and create a great workforce together.
Turn the negatives into positives. I love the ism, because I think there's a lot of isms in whichever way you look at it. But I think one of the things that I think technology is continuing to do that I'd be interested in your thoughts on is with further abilities to ask ChatGPT the question, does that put a higher wall up for us to ask the person next to us? If we can find the answer immediately and get that chemical, that endorphin shock of I got the answer to my question, or I go to the person next to me and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I'd love your perspective. Do you see that wall continuing to get higher, or do you see strategies that you can kind of cut through that? As new people come in, you want them to ask questions, and if they can ask questions to ChatGPT, they might not ask to the leader.
Well, it's again going back to the generational approach. Our approach in our generation was to ask our neighbor, ask our friend, right? That was part of our upbringing. Today's generation, they're connected to folks all over the globe. They don't need to see that there's not an expert within a 5-mile radius of them to go, oh, I know someone that is perfect at this. They happen to be in Italy or in Romania. I could just reach out and ask them. So they're more fluid in asking for help. They now have a global reach versus when we were growing up, it was more our local or regional reach. We had a bigger reach than our parents did because we started accepting technology as we were growing into the workforce. So it grew, but now it's global. So we have to take advantage that while they might not ask our neighbor, they could find the answer somewhere. So enable them to do the troubleshooting, enable them to figure out the problem, and don't think because they're not necessarily asking you for help that they're not getting help. But you do want to ensure that you're integrating them into the process, offering help. But if they say, "Oh no, I'm working on this, I'll figure it out," let them do it. Right? Just don't think that you're being antisocial or not reaching out to you for help. You have to try to work with them and take advantage of the way they work.
I think great points. You were talking about kind of giving them or tasking them with a duty or assignment and letting them go kind of figure it out allows us kind of the creativity and that spark to we'll call it add fuel to the fire. We're big on.
I think it's different. I think it's different than tasking them, right? Tasking them says you move mouse from left to right. That's the task. The problem is, hey, this machine over here doesn't have a mouse. How can the user interact with the machine? Well, they'll figure out that there's an extra mouse over there and they'll deliver it. So you provide them with the problem and they'll figure out a solution. If you're tasking them, it'll feel like you're being micromanaged yourself. You don't like that. You want to problem solve. You want to show that you're bringing value to the workforce. So give them a problem, tell them why it's a problem, tell them the type of results that you're expecting, but let them figure out the middle part.
Yeah, that's a good point. A refined approach to that. I guess you could say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're hoping to achieve, and then reverse engineer the goal, right? So, and then what does that look like? Let's take the first step. What's in front of you, right? Don't have to swallow the entire elephant. You just have to take that first walk forward. So, definitely good point.
Yep. And while I'm here, I do want to give a shout out to the Whole Cyberhuman Initiative, which is a non-for-profit that I support with Paul Cummings. One of the things that we do for veterans as well as others transitioning into cybersecurity is kind of provide them with a roadmap, a guided path to figure out their role in cyber, and just figured I'd throw it out here while I have some screen time.
Yeah, we definitely value coffee cup cheers there. Paul has been instrumental, on the ground floor, and it's been very much a pleasure to meet folks like yourself that are contributing to that cause, experts, leaders that are leading from the front and in that organization. We've definitely been very much a proponent of the Whole Cyberhuman Initiative. Whether that's feeding our apprentices to that program directly, or directing them from the get-go after having kind of a discovery discussion with them to find out really what their why is and, what they want to potentially do. If that's not with us, that's fine. But at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that we direct them to the learning that they want to experience and then the resources that come with that. So definitely appreciate everything that you and the team are doing.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about this industry, obviously the people are incredible because it takes passionate folks to accomplish, security outcomes, things of that nature for these organizations. But I think it's the clarity that folks like you, Chris, Paul, Simon, the clarity you guys have on your what and why. I think a lot of times we get stopped by the how, because the how is a continuous process that constantly requires, adaptability, being able to ask the right questions. But I think, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because you guys have so much passion for what you're doing, the what and the why is so clear. And I think that's inspiring to me. And then, collectively as a community, we, come together, figure out the how. And I think that's what makes this industry so great to be a part of. And I'm glad to be a member of it.
I thought there for a second he was pointing the why to me, because on the screen it says why is Jeff here in the conversation? No. Just all in good fun. Figured we'd enjoy a laugh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd tell you is, okay, a question from Paul: how do you attract more youth when it comes to STEM programming centric? That there's much more than cyber. So right now, I know my son's at this age where he's playing Minecraft. He's getting creative in it. In the beginning, it was just about having adventures. Now he's evolved to where he's building, and he wants to figure out what are those ingredients needed to make that special formula to get that next brick or whatever in Minecraft. So he's doing the research, he's figuring it out. So it's doing things like that at a young age to show them that it can be fun. It could be a game. You could be building and solving a problem while doing a game. We've done Mark Rober has a company where they send pieces to a kit and then provide them with instructions and like a science video about what's happening in that. And they can make tripwires and launchers and all sorts of things, but they just get pieces of wood and plastic and they're the ones to put it together. And when you see that smile at the end that, yes, they got it working, that's the type of thing that we need to try to enable for everyone. And the challenge when it comes to that is that as you have individuals that might have less access to funds for things like that, less access to technology for things like that, we have to work as a society to provide those underrepresented communities with resources to be able to provide those experiences to the next generation so that they can have that interest from when they're young. Because if you introduce it by the time they're in high school, they already figured out potentially where they want to go. Oh, I want to be a nurse, a firefighter, an astronaut. They never think of cyber. They like, it's the ones that have been introduced when you're younger that can do that.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, well, first of all, Chris, how old's your son?
He's 8.
Awesome. So I think that just the fluidity of the young child brain and the ability to, want to do whatever they can dream up is awesome, right? So we recently went to a goal setting workshop at the beginning of the year with somebody from the Vistage group and made an important point that if you ask somebody in their maybe 20s, 30s, what do you want to do? They have that directed path, because maybe that's because that's really what they want to do, or they found their why, or maybe that's because people have said, well, you can't be a NASCAR driver because, that takes 20 years of experience. But if you ask a kid, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to be an astronaut, like anything and then tomorrow could be an architect, right? And then maybe they find out that they just want to build rockets, right? So I just think it's really, really awesome to experience it at the ground floor, to give them the toolkits, and again, making sure that those folks that don't have those resources, that's available to them, and just seeing how they blossom, whether that's STEM or outside of STEM. And I would personally like to give a shout out to the Cyber Bites Foundation. Amanda Sowitz, about 2.5 weeks ago, I personally went up there to right outside of Quantico, and I encourage folks that are in the local area to at least, reach out to Amanda, the team over there. They're a small team, but they're very nimble. They're providing great opportunity for military and folks just generally that want to experience STEM type opportunities. Definitely went up there and, seeing that it's not just a cyber flavor. It could be, AR, augmented reality, VR, putting these Oculus goggles on, seeing what that environment is, building Raspberry Pi drones, Like they have so many different opportunities there. It's kind of ridiculous, and it's all free for folks as a kind of nonprofit. So definitely another great opportunity to get plugged into learning at different ages in that life cycle development for folks.
And the other thing I would say is higher education training like this isn't for everyone. There's people that they work with their hands, so working in a trades is better for them. There's people that learn differently, so they can't learn from reading. They have to learn from doing, or they have to watch a video 100 times to hear what's happening, to figure it out. I'm an auditory learner, so I've figured out listening is the fastest way for me to absorb information. But that took until I was like in my late 20s to really hone that in. And that made school such a challenge. So I think figuring out like how you learn best and really trying to enable that as soon as you can is highly recommended.
I think that's a foundational item that we don't learn early enough. I believe, and there's some folks out there, and Paul talks a lot about kind of the trade school concept and how you build those foundational mental models that overall set you up for success in whatever you're passionate about. I think one of the things in this industry is we're seeing a lot more folks to look up to that are not just the hacker or the person that people see in magazines. So when they think about, I want to be in cybersecurity because I saw it's the highest paying job on USA Today, and it looks cool that I get to play with technology and do some hacking stuff and break things down and rebuild them. That's what's bringing people into the industry. But I think there's a lot more folks nowadays talking about GRC and the business side, and there are other technical areas that are not hacking. You could be a vulnerability assessor. You could think about rules and configurations. You can look at the network and really be able to understand the whole sphere of it and how to protect it. I think that's pretty cool, probably because I'm passionate about it. But I'm looking forward to hearing more folks come in and say, I'm really passionate about looking at things from a high level and breaking them down, finding gaps, and helping these business leaders understand the unique mental model that I've been able to build, through these trade school concepts, through these, different training programs. Some people, like you said, Chris, don't like to read. So how are those, how do we set up those resources, and how do we continue to set up those resources so that it's accessible to every single learning modality, learning method? Would be interested in your thoughts there on, I know with what you're building, but any breakthroughs that you've seen and kind of getting people out of that, I just want to be a hacker, to kind of now I want to be a leader in this space.
Well, that's why the first thing I do with my coaching, and then the first thing we do at Whole Cyber Human Initiative, is to figure out their why, because their why will help guide them into potentially which side of the color wheel you're going to end up. And then from there, like, say it's red or blue, then you figure out, okay, where in the blue, where in the red. There's such a variety. Oh, no, you don't like red or blue? Okay, well, you could stand here in the middle and help the teams connect. Or you could be the one running the project, or you could be the one selling the project. And while you don't do the technical stuff, you understand why it's important, how it helps the business. And then you could sell that to companies, ensuring that you're doing it securely. There's so many different aspects to it. So figuring out what their why is and starting with that helps them figure out where they want to go first. And then from there, it's really doing like a gap assessment, like you mentioned. Okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. This is how people see me now. This is how I want them to see me in the future. So there's your technical skills and your soft skills. Both of them have to be assessed. Your soft skills end up what creates your brand and your branding that is critical when you're looking for a new role. So as you're looking for that role, you have to put yourself in that mindset from the beginning that I'm a cybersecurity professional from the beginning, not like I only get that title once I get the role. No, you're a cybersecurity professional now because by the time you read one chapter in that book, you know more than a lot of people do. So let's take that information, let's harness that information. You get in that mindset that you're a cybersecurity professional now, and you're just working to continuously evolve, continuously better yourself.
Yeah, I think
I see
that
Greg taking frantic notes.
yeah, I'm taking this as well. Greg and I like to put a pin in it for revisiting later, or somewhat rabbit brains at times can kind of get us down the deep dark path. But yeah, I mean, I think that recognizing that they have a ever evolving skill set that they may not know at all. Quite frankly, if we're being honest, none of the even experts, or we'll call them schmees, know it all. If we're being honest, we all have a lot to learn, especially as every second, every millisecond, this stuff, the way threat actors, the way people are getting into networks, the way businesses are evolving through technology, it's changing. So
there's programming languages that are being developed on a daily, weekly basis. There's companies that put out job listings for someone with 10 years experience in a language that just came out 2 years ago. They're expecting the world, but they have to understand, like, this is an ever evolving space. And just because you don't know one specific language, it could be based on another language. And there's a lot of similarities, just like speaking. There's a lot of languages that come from that French or that Spanish base, and connecting them. If you spoke one of those languages, you can then easier understand that other language.
yeah, I'd even
Not
say
easily,
so.
but easier.
It's all right. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say it's even as something so similar as you know a foreign language, but you don't know the local dialect, right? So you're there, but there's a parallel between the two to make you more a fluent speaker to the business, the security community, what have you. So taking that thought, looking at what the job recs are of asking for experience in something that didn't exist past X, Y, and Z years, how do the HR or human resources community and the security / business leaders better refine or work together to refine the job listings so people aren't scared away of taking that leap or trying?
Well, I would say I always recommend taking a step back and figuring out what exactly you're looking for this role to achieve. And from that job listing, if you're using that as a copy paste from before, what you really need to achieve that role, and set realistic expectations. You know they're going to need to ramp up. So instead of saying, oh, these are the expectations that I have for them in 2 years, okay, let's scale that back. You know you're not going to have all of that. So set realistically to where you want them to be now. That would provide them with the great foothold to build the rest on. And then once they see that you're investing in them, they're going to invest in you. The trouble I see is that in this I want it now, I want it today mentality, there's not any investment, there's not any loyalty between factions, employers, employees. We have to get back to being able to build loyalty, to invest in each other. And that could be part of the job description. Hey, in this role, you'll be doing this, you'll be learning this, and these are the types of problems that you'll be solving for this mission, right? So now you take it from what you're learning, what you're solving, and then what sort of mission, because today's generation, they want to go solve a problem. They want to help solve world hunger or a certain disease. Or so if you're tied to one of those, show them that this is part of your focus, so that you bring out that inner mission drive in them.
Yeah, that's a big impact. We're in an impact driven industry where I don't think people get into this industry unless they have that kind of impact driving them forward. How do you help leaders kind of stay focused? There's so much to learn in this space. We see people getting into the industry. Maybe they have 20 years experience, in another industry, and they're trying to learn everything that cybersecurity embodies, which is, it's really not possible. It creates confusion for them, which can stifle action. So I know it stems from the why. They have to figure out, how they learn, what their why is, and that leads to the competency area potentially of what they would be good at. But anything that you've come across to kind of rein people in and say, you don't need to know all this, and I think you hit on a key point there, where when you lay it out like that, the things you're going to accomplish, things you're going to learn, the missions you're going to achieve. I think that simplistic mindset, I think, is so important in this industry. I'm not sure, any kind of breakthroughs that you've had in getting people there and just kind of slowing them down to say, here's what you need to be really good at now. Here's what you're going to learn next. And then, here's how you can apply that to a overall mission.
But it's the same thing for leaders, right? There's CISOs that are focused on building up from a startup. And once they've built up, for them, their drive is done in that organization because they already built it up. They don't want to maintain. There's other people that are really good at maintaining. So they'll then come in and maintain that program. And then there's other people that want to optimize. They'll come in and they'll help optimize that program. So it's really figuring out like what you're good at and what problems you solve, because that's what you're going to tell that future employer. Hey, you have this problem. This is how I help solve this problem. So you're bringing me in for this problem solving ability. And then from there, you grow out to help different parts of the organization solve that type of problem.
Yeah, I think switching gears here for a minute. Chris, you've been a security practitioner, knee deep in the industry, helping businesses, helping customers navigate this complex stuff. So what would you say some of the biggest challenges security leaders, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but security leaders and security teams face currently, top of mind threats, what have you?
Well, it goes back to, how does an organization generate value? Most of the times, there's struggle in identifying what's the core application. How does that core application generate value? What sort of data flows through it? How sensitive is the data that flows through it? And it's really figuring out all the different pieces to the onion to peel it back to be able to secure it. So no matter how a threat actor is, they could eventually get you, but what you want to do is you want to build that resilience. You want to ensure that whether it's an earthquake or it's someone DDoSing your primary location, that you're resilient to that. You have backups in place or different strategies to tackle that. So that's what I see the challenges being, especially in a cloud first, SaaS, this everything environment. Now their core data is everywhere. And it's almost like, okay, let's start pulling it back in. Do we really need 10 different software as a service providers to share our data with our vendors? How about we integrate it into one? And like solving that business problem. I know you need to get it out there. I know you need to have this functionality. How can we provide you with this same functionality with a a more closely monitored application that we can ensure that our sensitive IP is not flying out the door, going to China or whatever.
Yeah, it definitely requires the conversation. I think those are some fascinating questions to kind of start that conversation or further it, take it to the next level from that standpoint. Before microservices kind of became a streamlined term in the industry when it comes to segmentation and kind of how this software as a service world, everything's as a service now, it seems like, from a technology standpoint to a delivery standpoint. I remember, 3 or 4 years ago, going to a SaaS provider and saying, how are your clients segmented in your environment? And they were like, what do you mean segmented? And, all these companies, hundreds of companies are all playing together in the same pool, just sending their information back and forth. And it was working. So nobody asked the question on, what does this look like? How is it architected? Where's my data sit? How do you make sure it doesn't, intertwine with other companies, which is scary to think about from that standpoint. If you have a line item that's supposed to go through this, manufacturing line that's automated to make something, and it's the wrong SKU number. So I think everything's kind of commingling. So I think it's kind of it's keeping things simple, the KISS model, but having those important conversations that you're saying and asking the questions on. You want this to work. We want it to work as well. We just want it to work in the right manner. And I think when that happens, it builds trust, and that builds strong culture. And that's what, as we continue to row forward, all of us together, down the river, up the river, whichever way you look at it, I think that those are going to be critical aspects of building a great culture, both in the industry and in the individual companies that we all have the opportunity to impact.
Greg, you're flowing. Love the thoughts there. We typically ask folks, that we bring on the show, Chris, just kind of round out the conversation, what security means to them. Security has different, or that layer of protection has different elements to it. So, based on you being in the industry, what does security mean to you, Chris?
Security to me means being able to do what I want and not being worried that either someone's going to stop me from doing it when I want to do it, someone's watching me doing it when I do it. And it's the same approach that I take with guiding stakeholders in the business, figuring out what they want to achieve and how to enable them to resiliently deliver that goal, that mission that you're trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis. Starts with safety, just like with humans. There's psychological safety. There's safety of the systems. There's functionality. So figuring out what we need to do to make it safe, and then from there, what could we do to make it function? Because if it's too safe, you end up throwing it in the ocean and no one can use it. So you still want it to be able to interact with and function with. So you want that functionality to be there. So it's that marriage between the two.
Yeah, I heard really great points. I heard on one of the podcasts listened to that, friction is always a word that it's like usability versus security. How far do we lock down the systems is always a question. But the point being was, folks in your business typically want to do the right thing. We talk about shadow IT and people downloading software that they ultimately want to solve the problem, right? Whatever that's the first assignment to get there. But they don't want to natively, circumvent security controls. They just want to get their job done. So I think it's back to the security culture component, that having these open and honest conversations, eliciting feedback, making it okay to get feedback where they're comfortable to bring these, hey, this application is, causing additional 3 hours of my day that I could, better utilize X, Y, and Z area. So I think it really comes.
Or hey, I see this Chat GPT thing out there. It seems like it can solve my business functions. Are we able to try it out? Sure. Let's talk about what you're looking to achieve. If that is really the solution that you think it is, and then work through some of the concerns. Like if you don't understand how it's been programmed, the algorithms that go into it, and understand the biases and the variability in the way it computes its results, you could get a tragic outcome. So you don't want that to be your day one delivering to customers. So you want to ensure that you work through those concerns ahead of time, when it's in the nascent stage versus they already went out, they already paid with their personal card, because it's just $50 a month, and they connected it to your cloud service, and now it's a chat bot for the company. Yeah, you want to have those conversations way before then.
And I think it goes back to when these folks have their, we'll call it bring your own device. You know, they download it, they connect in your cloud, they have those security policies that run, and you know, whether it's Microsoft 365 or whatnot, but they also download Snapchat, and Snapchat natively asks for your location information, right?
And
just
TikTok.
Again, having that conversation first and saying it's okay to bring new innovative ideas, applications, software to the table. Let's talk about it. I'd rather you do that than my security team panic and try to inventory what we thought we were supposed to have, right?
Stay away from the closet. I guess people used to say in the past, you know, you stay as far away from the IT and security closet as possible, and you try to hide when you're doing anything that you think they wouldn't approve of. So I think we're breaking down some of those barriers, you know, each day. But you know, it's a cultural shift, like you've mentioned, Chris. It's been a fascinating discussion. Definitely appreciate your time. So,
absolutely, thanks for having me on, and love to come on again in the future.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on again. Jeff, any wrap up questions? Any final thoughts?
I could talk with Chris and you guys for hours. But I value your time, and definitely appreciate you taking the time this Friday to join us and provide your tremendous insights. Definitely would like to see how people can find you, Chris, how people can get started in your coaching, if that interests them. We'll start there.
Well, CPF-Coaching.com, easy way to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Chris_Foulon, and CPF Coaching, many other places as well. So that's the best way to find me.
And to take that first step, he has a fantastic newsletter that I'm personally subscribed to. There's a lot of healthy free content to just start that question or answering that question of why. And again, get your feet in there on, you know, what your cyber journey might look like and how Chris and the team, even that whole cyber human, can help enable and empower that mission. So I guess round things out, you know, I'd like to know, you know, who's been the most influential person in your life, Chris, and why?
I mean, some of the folks that have invested a lot of time and energy in me have been folks like Alan Alford, Gary Hayslip, Chris Roberts, a lot over in the TinkerSec community. They've invested a lot of time in me, so definitely have to give hats up to them. And the folks that have invested in me has been the reason why I've been investing back in others, because I feel the need to give back and to continue that on.
Yeah, that's a healthy list of folks. And I'm sure that you have your personal board of directors that we talk about, and then you have your professional board of directors, people that can help grow you and get you to that next level that we talked about earlier on. Again, Chris, been fascinating discussion. I'll leave you, gents, as we started. Coffee cup cheers. I wish everybody listening out there has a happy, healthy, and safe weekend ahead. We want to thank you again. Follow our content if you're enjoying what we put out to the world. And I definitely encourage you to reach out to Chris. Chris is always an open door to help in whatever way possible. And with that, Chris dropped, but we'll leave it like we leave every other episode. Make it your mission today to make somebody else's day better. And with that, have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.